All right.
And with that being said, let's bring Levi on. Levi, how you doing? Thank you for coming on.
Hola, but that's only Spanish I know.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
Hola, Mr. King of Short Trips, right here.
Yeah, I tell you what, if I see $4, man, I'm all over that sucker, and it is what it
Somebody's got
is.
to take it. But okay,
Somebody's got to take it.
Levi and I, we did our behind the wheel a while ago, maybe almost a year ago. He's
About a
on the
year ago,
channel,
Yeah, it was
and
one
it's
of the
long
first
overdue
two.
that he's back. And I trust Levi with numbers more than I trust myself. So who
And that's
better
saying a
than?
lot.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Okay. So who better than telling our audience now and 10,000 later, how to read your 1099s, how to match it, how to consolidate everything. Again, it's not tax advice. But before we get into that, Levi has a wonderful channel called Tip You in the App, which we all hear how many times a day and we never get tipped, but he can talk about his channel. Also, sometimes on Mondays, personally myself, like yesterday, I was on for a couple hours. They have an amazing driver group spaces on X, on Twitter. It's called Drivers Coast to Coast, and you guys can go subscribe to that. It's free, obviously. It's on X. They run this live streamish kind of a thing called Spaces. Amazing drivers, top drivers in their own cities, great tips and tricks, their stories of the week, and great stuff. So I'm on there once in a while. Please join us on Mondays. Check him out. Called Drivers Coast to Coast. So with that said, Levi, introduce yourself.
Hey guys, yeah. So my name's Levi. Before I was an Uber driver, I spent about 20 some odd years as an accountant and as an economist. I have 2 graduate degrees, both in an MBA and in public administration. So I know numbers and I love spreadsheets. And I've been driving for Uber for just about, actually, just at my 4-year mark. So I've been doing this about 20 to 40 hours a week, not quite full time, but pretty substantive. And so I got my 1099s just like everybody else, and I started looking at them and my tax summary statement. And I'll be honest, none of it made any sense. So you and I talked, Sergio, and I thought I'd just kind of dive into the numbers and see if I can explain things. And that's where we're at today.
I think Sergio might have froze.
Oh, Sergio froze.
Yeah.
See, I scared him away with all the numbers talk and stuff like that. So, Chris, we have a quick slideshow. I'll kind of run through
Yep.
that if you want.
Yeah,
And
let me know when you want to forward to the next slide, and we'll go from there. And Sergio, if you're there, come back in. So we're gonna pull you out for the time being, but come back in a little bit.
All right. So I'm going to tell you 2 things in this slideshow. Number one, what you need to know for your taxes. I'll just explain the forms. And then number 2 thing is I'll kind of show you some of the data that I found. And this is going to be a much bigger expose in the future. I can't explain everything because what I found is crazy. You need to stick around and wait for it. So let's go to the next slide. All right. So what you need to know. Next slide. Okay, there are 3 forms that we're going to get from Uber, and you're going to get 3 forms from Lyft. Now, I didn't drive very much for Lyft last year. I only did, I think, 100 rides or something like that. So I didn't get a 1099 from Lyft. So I'm only going to talk about Uber, but the data is still the same. And what you're going to get is a tax summary. And that's the document you're going to see over there on the left. And that's going to talk about the number of drives you've done and how many your online miles. But the crazy number that we're all going to look at is it says, hey, Levi, your gross payments were $54,000. And there's no way I made $54,000. Right. The number on the right, the third number is the $33,000. Let's see if I'm looking at it correctly. Yeah, $32,000. And that's actually was pretty close to what was deposited into my bank account from Uber. So that number in the middle are tax deductions. And oh, you skipped a couple of slides there.
I don't know how that happened, but hold on.
Okay, yeah.
I think
Go back to
Sergio's playing around in the back end.
Sergio, we're going to ban you. Go to the next slide. There you go. Next one. There you go. So let's explain the tax summary just real quickly. It's going to show the number of trips that you've done, how many online miles, and then it's also going to show you how much the passengers paid for the most part. That's the 55,000. There's some not accurate numbers in there, but that's that. And then the 32,000 is what was deposited into my account. The $22,000 in the middle, that's the most critical thing. That's the deductions, the taxes, airport fees, booking fees, whatever it may be, of what Uber even paid itself on our behalf. And that's the $22,000. So that's itemized in what's called a table 1 on the second page of the 2023 tax summary that you're going to get from Uber. And it's going to break each one of those down. So what you're going to report, if you go to the next slide. Oh, let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, we'll skip around. There you go. So you're going to get two 1099s, and these two 1099s are what you're going to actually submit to the IRS. One's for 43,000, and one for me was 10,000, and that sums up to that $4,000, give or take. Now, this is really interesting. Why are there two 1099s? And number one, the $43,000 basically represents all of what the passengers paid. The $10,000 is my bonuses, promotions, and my tips. The best I can tell, the reason why they break them up into two different transactions or two different 1099s is because they're two different transactions. If you think about it, right, Chris, when we do our Uber trips, the passenger pays the $20 for the Uber. We get in the car, we take them, somewhere. And then if they tip us, that's a second transaction. Same thing is true with our bonuses, our quests. Those are a separate transaction. So again, we're dealing with the IRS, we're dealing with Uber, two really cluster whatever of organizations. And that's why they are broken up this way. And I think if you go to the next slide, I even break down how I'll do my taxes here. So the gross payment that you're going to get from Uber, the combination of the two 1099s, that's going to be reported as your income. And it's really important here because that is what Uber is telling the IRS they paid you. Now, you and I both know we didn't make that money, but that's what they're telling the IRS. The expenses and fees and taxes, if you break them out, you're going to break them out and itemize those as deductions in your taxes. And then that should give you the remaining amount, which is that $32,357 that I had. And from there, that $32,000, I'll continue with my deductions. So like I'm going to claim my mileage, my cell phone, Sirius XM, et cetera, whatever else is going to be your taxes. Chris, is that a pretty comprehensive? I didn't see any questions in the chat yet, but does that make sense so far?
Yeah, so far. I mean, at least from my end, I've been doing this for a little while though, so I'm sure if people in the chat have any questions, put it in the questions and we'll get back, or I'm sorry, put it in the comments and then we'll get to them.
Yeah, for sure. And just so you know, Chris, on my website, I'll release a more detailed explanation so people can go take a look at that. But the really interesting thing wasn't really this breakdown, because I think in the long run, if anybody's going to hire a tax expert or anybody else, they're going to get this solved by their CPA. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next slide. Here's what I learned. Now, again, I'm a data guy. And okay, what you're looking at, this table on the right-hand side, I actually went through every single one of my weekly statements. If you've gone into Uber and you've signed in and downloaded your weekly statements, I actually added up every single weekly statement. And what Uber said I earned in the weekly statements was $32,070. But you remember in the taxes, they said I earned $32,357. So right off the bat,
Fuzzy math.
it's fuzzy math, right? That didn't make sense. So that didn't make any sense. So I thought maybe I'd just look at 1 month. So go to the month of January, go to the next slide. And I compared my January monthly statement, because you can download them by the month, and I compared it to my weekly statements. And the numbers didn't quite add up. It was actually really complex. I was trying to get everything to balance to the penny, and I was off by about $40, and I couldn't find it. If you go to the next slide, it just shows you kind of what my numbers look like. Again, on my website, I'll dive through these more in depth. But I'm going to blow your mind here, Sergio and Chris and everybody else. Go to the next slide. Uber, in their monthly statement, said, I did 307 trips. But in their weekly statements, it totaled out to 303. It didn't make any sense. So the numbers, I was off by $46, but they didn't have the trips right. So I tried to find one more month where I had a clean month, and I was like, let me just see if I can make any sense of this. If you go to the next slide, I looked at the month of April. And then I looked in the app on my phone and I just tried to track everything. The month of April was great because I basically had a clean month where the weeks actually totaled up correctly. If you look on the left, it says I completed 192 trips, right?
Yep.
Now, Sergio, what is
Yep.
70 plus 70 plus 76?
216.
216. So in the app, it's telling me I did 216 trips. On their tax summary, they said I did 192 trips.
Mm.
Okay. So I'll summarize all this
Well,
on the next slide. Well, go ahead.
you know what? Actually, I could probably figure out the discrepancy right here is because the months don't technically line up. So when they're doing your tax breakdown by month, what they do is it's from April 1 to April 30. And if you look at, say, like, April 24th to May 1st, that can actually go to the next month because of the way it's reporting. It's like it's kind of like when you do the new year. So if you get paid usually that last week on the first week of the year. So it doesn't qualify for 20 like the previous years. It qualifies for the next years because you actually get paid on the date of the next year. So that could be where the discrepancy lies. So if you went through, but
Yep.
the only thing is it shouldn't be 20 something trips that are not showing up there unless you did a really good day and you had like 20 something trips for that particular day or something.
Yeah, but Levi does like 50 a day.
I do like
So
50 in a day, but
There you go.
yeah, well, if you take a look, so maybe what you're saying, Chris, is potentially that 462. If you look in the very middle, it says March 27th through April 3rd, there's $462 that I earned. That 31st is actually reporting in the month of April, is probably what you're thinking. Even though I
yeah.
drove it on the 31st
Yeah, it could
of
be.
March, it's showing in that. That's fair.
Yeah, because
And that
because you got to remember even though you could get cashed out that day because of Express or something, or the quick cash out. The thing is, you're still going to get that weekly. So the weekly
Yeah.
doesn't end until Monday at 4 or at 3:59 a.m. So even if it's a couple of days difference, that could qualify where it would be into the next month. So you could see the couple of discrepancies that may be something where you could probably look at the numbers and see if they do total up that way. But the biggest thing is it should be if you're looking yearly to yearly, again, you might have like a few trips because if you do the 31st first, in that time it might go off or where it is in the week. I'm not sure completely. I mean, this is something that maybe we might have to reach out to Uber or Lyft and see if that's the case. On the reporting, but yeah, that could be where the discrepancy does lie. So that might be something if you look into and see, that might actually explain it.
Yeah,
that
I mean
makes
that's a
total
good point.
sense. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Sergio.
No, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, I missed like 5 minutes of it. My Google thing crashed, so I took my virtual back screen down. Supposedly, there's a bug. Google is fixing it. So if you guys are running this kind of show, don't put your screen up. I have a question for you,
Go
Levi.
ahead.
So I have the 1099s and yearly statements of this Boston driver that did the behind the wheel with the highest earning driver in the country, according to what I know so far. When I looked at his 1099s, right, Uber numbers and his yearly summary, the numbers for 1099K and the 1099 NEC matched. And the other thing that wasn't there is that, it shows paid transaction count, right? This guy was doing like 7,700 trips a year. And those also matched. So on yours, did they match the 1099s dollars and the trip count to your summaries?
Yes, if you go back up to I think the third slide, Chris, those numbers matched.
Okay.
So the completed trips were basically there. They were off by just a couple, and Chris, that could be like you're talking about the New Year's
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah.
But my overall point isn't to necessarily accuse Uber of fraud or that they're making
No, no,
total
no.
errors here. I think
Yeah.
my total point here is it's really freaking complex. It's
Yeah.
it's absurdly complex to try to dive through and make all of these numbers add up. So if you try to use your weekly statements, they don't add up to your monthly statements a lot of the time. Or if you look in your app and try to look and compare it to your weekly statements, the numbers just don't balance. And no matter what I tried, I couldn't get the numbers to balance. And it was just really frustrating because I felt like overall the $32,000 that they're saying was my net payout was basically about right. It may have been a couple
Yeah.
$100 off from what I thought I had. So I do feel confident and enough to file my taxes, right? I don't feel
Yeah.
like it's totally in error and it's totally screwed up.
But
I just
for a
couldn't get
guy
it to
like you,
balance.
right? For a guy like you that's
Yeah.
a stickler for these things, this must be maddening, right?
Right. And I think my, the overall point, would be like, why is it so freaking complicated? It makes no
Yeah.
sense for it to be so complicated. You'd think it would be easier for other people to do. And if I have 20 years of experience and I know spreadsheets and I love to dive into the data, I should be able to make it balance, and I'm not able to do it. So I've actually hired and brought on a CPA. So I'm going to have the CPA go through it with me, and maybe I can get it to balance, and I'll do a follow up kind of expose. Did it really balance,
You
or is
know,
there really fraud, or something like that?
I had an amazing, like actually wonderful email this week, last week actually, from a driver who pointed this out. And in fact, we talked about this yesterday on Coast to Coast, right? Um, do you think the dollar numbers are matching? Remember, we talked about how sometimes, the riders have a discount, right?
That's right.
And so is Uber on our 1099s or the yearly summary not considering that discount and putting the higher number in? That's why our numbers are kind of skewed. You think that would be a possibility?
I think it is, and that's we talked about it last night, and I was unable to accurately track that data to give you a definitive answer here.
Yeah,
But basically, I had 500. It showed me 577 something dollars of
yeah,
Uber passenger discounts in my
yeah,
my forms. But if I were to take that number out, it definitely changed the numbers. But because I couldn't get it to balance, I didn't know exactly the way they're accounting for it.
yeah,
A good example, Sergio, is sometimes how they have our number in the weekly
yeah,
statements is a negative number
yeah,
and other numbers are positive. You're trying to get it all to balance. So when you look at a weekly statement, in and of itself, it works. Or if you look at any one of these documents by themselves, it works. It's when you try to compare any of the documents, you don't know how they applied it because they use different terms. And because one number is a positive in one form, but that same number could be shown as a negative in another form.
yeah.
I just couldn't get it to balance. So
No, I
I
mean,
can't,
no,
yeah,
if you couldn't imagine us, right? So, to
right.
me, it's like, yeah, for a simple business, as we always say on the channel, it's such a simple thing. Pick up point A, drop off point B. Why does everything have to be so complicated on their end, right? And even the reporting part of it. But the other thing that I wanted to quickly talk to you about is, I don't know if you guys did already. So if I'm repeating, then we'll pass. Um, Once you do your taxes, right? You're gonna obviously. I know you. We talked about your spreadsheets and all that wonderful stuff before about your cost per mile, right?
Yeah,
And your cost per mile down to the penny, right?
correct.
So how was, let's say, 2023 for you? What were your numbers like? Were they decent? Did you make same amount of money as you did the year before? How did that work out for you?
Yeah, I'm looking at my spreadsheet right here. I didn't know what you were going to ask me exactly, so I had all of my numbers. And one quick note to all of your listeners: I share all of my data, so you can look at every single one of my weeks and every single one of my data points. But let's say my cost per mile is what you wanted to know. Let's say
Yeah.
cost per mile.
Well, I know you switched
Um,
cars towards the end of the year, but
That's right. So my cost per mile in 2020 was 27 cents. In 2021, it was 28 cents. 2022 is 27 cents. And in 2023 is 29 cents. However, this year I switched to the Tesla, and my cost per mile is 37 cents. Cost per
30
mile
cents.
switching to the Tesla.
Is that
And
because
the
of your
reason why
depreciation?
the depreciation, yeah, my depreciation went from about 10 cents a mile to 14 cents per mile. The second thing is I didn't get my home charger installed quickly.
Yeah,
And so my supercharging just costs a lot of money.
very much so.
However, the last few weeks I've been getting closer down to about 30 cents cost per mile
Right.
with the Tesla.
Can you give us
It's
like a quick synopsis of how you come up with your numbers?
Yeah.
Because look, the audience now
Squeeze it.
watching later, please listen to this man. This man knows the Bible of how to figure out fixed costs, variable costs, all this stuff. So give us a quick summary of how you come up with your numbers, because that's the only way you're going to know if that's a profitable trip that you're looking at on the ping screen. If you don't know your cost per mile, how do you guys drive, right? All right, so how do you do it?
So I break it down into 3 parts, my cost per mile. Part number 1 is fuel. And for most people with a regular car, it's pretty easy, right? You can just track how many miles you drove, you know your miles per gallon, how much did you pay for fuel, and that will give you a pretty simple cost per mile. For electric cars, it's a little bit more complex because it depends on where you charge and how you charge, etc. But it's, for the most part, you get your fuel cost per mile. The maintenance cost per mile is actually an estimate. It's not my actual maintenance cost per mile. What I do is I figure out, well, how much do tires cost? How much do oil changes cost? How much do brake changes? And how many miles do I change those things out? And then I can break those down, each one of those down to the penny for the most part. And then I can then add that back in as a cost per mile. And then the final thing, and I think the most important thing that very few people track, is their depreciation per mile. Now, depreciation, again, it's just an estimate because I don't actually know what my depreciation is on the car until I sell it, right? Or
Yeah.
get rid of the vehicle. There's a couple of ways to depreciate a car, Sergio. The first way that most people think about is like, hey, I bought this car and immediately I take it off the lot, it depreciates a couple $1,000s. I don't do it that way. I just straight line to the depreciation.
Okay.
It's actually a pretty simple formula, and I've got all those calculators on my website. But the way I depreciate a car is I go, okay, I bought a car for 30,000, and let's say I have 0 miles on it, and then I'm gonna drive 300,000 miles on that car, and then I could just take that, and at the end of the 300,000 miles, let's say it's worth 0. Then I
Yeah.
can take that formula, right, and just say, okay, it's 10 cents per mile because I'm gonna
Yeah.
get, and it's pretty simple. The Tesla, because I'm kind of new to it, I'm still not really sure. I've been depreciating it at 14 cents a mile.
I think
The
you're too
reason
high on
why
that.
I think I am a little bit too high on
Yeah.
that, but I'm concerned because I've heard crazy costs about the battery. But
Yeah.
let me tell you why I track it this way. And this is the most important thing. The reason why I track my depreciation is so when Uber pays me, let's say Uber pays me $1,000, but I know my costs for that week. I keep that money in a bank account, and then I only pay myself absent my costs. So let's say my costs were $200. So I only take $800 out to pay myself, and I keep that $200 in that account to pay for my fuel to when I need the brakes done. I have money in a savings account. And if I want to then either make an extra payment on my vehicle, or if I want to use that money and save it up for a down payment on the next vehicle, I'm accounting for and accumulating all of my depreciation, because you and I both know what a lot of drivers do is they cash out everything, they put it in their personal
Yeah.
bank account, and then when something happens, they don't have any money set aside.
That's
So
such great advice.
I have a lot of money set aside. I have enough to cover, the deductible. There's a $2,500 deductible, and if I ever have any kind of needs or maintenance repairs on my vehicles, I just have money sitting aside in my Uber account. And the final thing, I'll turn it back over to you guys. What's really good about this type of transaction is you can take these bank statements to a loan officer and prove to them that you've got a business because it's a separate account. All of my
Yeah.
transactions are done through that account. So
Do
that's
you
why I
have
do it that way.
do you have an LLC, or you just run it on your personal stuff? No.
I just do it on my social. Yeah, I don't have an
Okay.
LLC.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is amazing advice, people. Seriously, don't mix business with pleasure, right? Don't take all that cash out and spend it, and then you need brakes, you need tires. Now you're driving on bald tires or worn out brakes, and customer hears it and they complain about it. This is like a chain reaction, right? Listen to this man. Seriously, I mean, I respect him as much as anybody I know in the business, because I mean, number one, his numbers isn't true, good numbers, and I don't know. I mean, I think if you don't take his word for it, then you guys are going to be lost. Now, one other thing, I know we're not giving tax advice, but when you're separating your income, do you also put money aside for your taxes out of that weekly, or do you just kind of not do it? I don't, because
I
Well, first of all, do you take the 67-cent deduction? Is that what you do, or do you
I
do
do.
itemized deduction? Okay.
I do. I take the 67 cents. But the way I do it is each week I know how many miles that I drive, and then so I could say here if I made $1,000 and I drove X number of miles, I know this is my taxable income, and then I multiply that number by 15%, and I
Yeah.
save that money too. Right.
Okay.
So all of my costs and expenses are really just ways for me to put aside money for me so I can pay for taxes, repairs, and stuff like that. It's not real, right? Because I don't know what my
Well, I
taxes
mean,
are
it
going to
could
be.
change, but at
Yeah,
least you have the funds to be able to do it, because at the end of the year, I know a lot of drivers, they drive full time and then they owe taxes and they have no money to pay for it, right? And then they're in bigger
that's right.
trouble, which is like financially responsible, but they have, I guess they have to do what they have to do. One last thing for you. I know you did a video, I don't know if you guys talked about it on your own channel. Please go visit his channel. It's in YouTube, Tip You in the App. Amazing content, really. He's very calm, very cool, unlike me. so but you did a video, right? And then you broke down your last 4 years of driving down to trips, your cost and all that good stuff. So give us a little bit of a summary of your 4-year career, Uber driving career, and where you drive too, by the way.
Yeah, so I drive in Syracuse, New York, upstate, which is about 4 hours from New York City. I show you how remote our market is. We don't even have Uber Comfort. I mean, I can't itemize that. I can only pick Uber X, so I don't have a lot of options here. It's a college town, and over the last 4 years, I've learned to really just drive late at night on the college campus. It's true. I'll do 50, 55 trips in a 12-hour day. I start about 10 o'clock in the morning and I'll go till about 2 a.m., something like that. Um, it's been phenomenal. I quit my job as an executive at an agency just to do this. Now, I don't make as much money. I don't want to make it sound like I'm getting rich. You guys can see my taxes, and I share all my data. I make about $39 per hour before expenses on average. I do about 20 to 40 hours a week driving, but I love it. I think it's
Is that
phenomenal.
online hour? That's online hour, right?
That's my online hours, but my
But
online
then,
hours and
yeah,
my
yeah,
online hours are basically my actual hours because what ends up happening is the minute I turn the app on in Syracuse, you're going to get a ride. There's no
yeah.
sitting around waiting for rides. I don't cherry pick. I know. It's the antichrist. I
No,
literally
but
take
I mean, no,
a
no, no.
ton of
But I
rides.
think,
Yeah,
if you did cherry pick, you would probably do a lot worse, because I mean, all you're doing is, I know your style of driving. You're doing these really quick trips to do 15, 12-hour shift, right? It's not easy. You're doing these quick trips. Obviously, you have a Quest that you're taking advantage of. Now you have the EV credit that you're taking advantage of, right? So to me, it's like that's for his market. So when you guys hear him making 39, don't complain that I'm not making 39. That's his market. But the
that's
point
right.
is, he figured out the strategy that's perfect for his market, and he's sticking to it, and he's enjoying it, and he's doing it. So, how many trips was it? 8,000? What? 800 some trips?
Yeah, a little over 8,300 something. I don't know. I
Yeah.
do so many trips on a weekend. I'm doing, 50 to 100 trips really quickly. But so to me, like I say, I'm a short trip guy. I take every trip it comes in. Now that my minimum is $5 because I get the dollar EV credit. But
Yeah.
before that, I had the Prius. I do that. But I calculate, I know I'm going to get a Quest, and the Quests are pretty junk right now. They're like, 50 cents to $1 per trip. But a number that I always calculate that I never hear anybody else talk about is tips. I average
Yep.
$1.32 in tips on every single trip. That doesn't mean every trip
Wow.
tips me, but if I take
Yeah.
every trip, my tips, and just sum them up and divide them by the number of trips. So I know at a bare minimum, I'm going to make $6 or $7 on every single trip. If I can get 5 of those done in every hour, that's what I'm going for. So I'm trying to do 5 trips an hour. I'm trying to just bust those suckers out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're the best at what you do, and you know what works in your market, and you're hitting it. You're enjoying doing it. He's one of the Uber drivers that loves what he's doing, and coming from corporate America, doing this is not easy. It has its challenges. I'm sure you had your share of pukers here and there, but
That's right.
he's a great guy. He's personable. He gets the tips, and he knows his numbers. So please go visit his website, Tip You in the App. Go visit his YouTube channel, Tip You in the App. And then Mondays, he's on Coast to Coast on X Spaces. Anything else to add? I'll give you the floor for a minute. Give our drivers some advice about how to battle this you know, the Uber beast, right? I mean, there's good, there's bad, and you know, but to give our audience some advice.
Well, yeah, I think it comes across because I'm a very positive guy. I'm a nice guy, and I feel like I'm making good money. It comes across like I'm pro Uber, and I definitely feel that Uber deserves a lot of the complaints that we give. I think, Uber isn't necessarily, and same with Lyft. There's problems with them all. The one thing that I would tell every single driver is have an exit strategy. And in fact, I would tell my entrepreneur friends have an exit strategy. So I consult other business owners, executives and startups. And the first thing I tell them is, how are you going to get out of this business? Are you able to sell out of it? So Matt, the guy on Drivers Coast to Coast, gave some great advice last night. He talked about doing multiple apps. Now I'm pretty much an Uber X kind of guy, so I'm kind of at a little bit of risk, but diversify, right? So if you do DoorDash, Uber Eats, Lyft, or whatever else is out there, Instacart, you diversify. If one of these apps shut us down, we're able to go out there and do something else. And I think there's a lot of other incomes that we can make as gig workers. I think a lot of you as drivers are talented. You're a writer, you're a graphic designer. And so we can, because we're gig workers, diversify. So that way when Uber sucks, and it does suck for me in my market sometimes, like the whole summer, I just play a lot of golf, right? I can't count on that income. I would recommend everybody diversify. And the final piece of advice I would give you is that there's no ride worth it. Sometimes we'll get like a $40 surge, right? I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to make so much money, right? And there's no ride worth our safety, our health, our sanity. I don't need $40. There's just nothing I need for that kind of money. It's great. So I would recommend to everybody, just drive a little bit slower, relax just a little bit. Don't get too crazy about one surge or one ride or one tip, because sometimes it's not worth it. So that's my advice.
I agree with you 100%. And thank you for coming on. Thank you for educating our audience now in the replays. I will see you around, obviously. So here's Levi from Syracuse, and king of short trips right here, and he's making it happen his way. So thank you, Levi, much appreciated.
Hey, be well. Take care, guys. Bye.
All right, have a good one. Thanks.
All right, thanks for watching. That short little clip was from our live stream, Show Me the Money Club, with Sergio and myself, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Make sure you subscribe, turn on all notifications so you get notified when we go live, as well as all of our awesome content. Make sure to check out this video right here, which will take you to the entire live stream, or check out this video right there. All right, drive smart, everyone.